Hi, I'm Annie Botticelli, and welcome to my discussion about this epic clash, or ongoing clashing between Saturn and the planet Uranus. These are outer planets, so they're far away from us and they move slowly. So when they come together in the cosmos, it's not a one-hit wonder generally. It's this, they come together, then they retrograde and they move apart and they dance together. And so this process of this connection is actually a lot longer than one would expect, okay, if you're not familiar with the aspect. So the first must know about this aspect is that we are already familiar with these energies clashing, and we've already started to see how the effects are going to be. So that's one exciting, a positive must know, is that it's not a complete uncertainty because we've already been dancing with this energy. So in March of 2020, besides other things going on, we also had Saturn and Uranus come within close proximity. They didn't hit exactly, but they got close enough to really let everybody know that they were together. And if everyone remembers what happened in March 2020, the world pretty much shut down, systems started breaking down, and things went the way they did. So if you want to have more information on how astrology explains, I'm going to obviously speak to this particular aspect in this video or podcast if you're listening to the podcast version. But if you want to hear how astrology in general explains the coronavirus, explains the systems breaking down, then just search for Annie Botticelli coronavirus. And I go into a massive amount of detail about how astrology explains all of this. And we're going to go into another aspect of this, which is Uranus-Saturn square. Okay, so in March and throughout 2020, we've had this energy of the old and the new clashing. Okay, so this is the second must know. This epic battle of Uranus, used to be known as Uranus, and Saturn, used to be known as Kronos, is as old as the recorded mythological stories of these planets. It's the old father-son, parent-child clash, the clash of the tradition and the old and versus the new. So this story, although it's new in the way that it's manifesting now, it's not new to humanity, okay? So that's a major must know. So we already know this dynamic. We already see it. We see it in our lives with our own parents, with our own children, with, governments versus their constituents. We see it in everywhere. It's an archetypal war, basically, that has been present since recorded history, and it's coming into the forefront again now, and it's going to continue probably going on for a very long time to come. So although there are stresses and there are challenges to help ease the tension and the fear around this, just know that we've already been going through this as just a normal life archetypal type of energy, okay? So the Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius, and Saturn is the traditional ruler of Aquarius, okay? So again, this is like the old way of ruling, the new way of ruling. All of these things are coming up in a big way, as we can see it with our world politics. The United States in particular has had a lot of extra energy around this because of karmic points that are being crossed astrologically at this time for that country. But obviously the whole world is going through a massive karmic clearing. So this story about revolution versus tradition has been getting very strong in 2020 and is going to echo throughout 2021 as we have the exact clashes on February 17th, then on June 14th, then on December 24th, all in 2021. And we will have another exact clash in the beginning of October in 2022. Okay, so this dance of what's old and outdated and has to be swept away, what's old but needs to stay in place to bring stability to the unstable, new fledgling sort of things that are going on. So this sort of battle, this clash, this face-off is going to be echoing throughout our personal out to the global experience. So topics like currencies and food production and cash versus cashlessness, crypto, just the ways that we interact with our exchange, even like the New York Stock Exchange, the Dow Industrial, all of the markets are going to continue to be undergoing radical changes. And so we'll see notable things that go on in the world markets. And also with how we are running our own, our way with money. Some really great advice from understanding what's happening here. And part of what the lesson is, I think, that Spirit is bringing to us through the clashing of these aspects, is really to look at the topic of a lot of overhead, of living in debt and having very high overhead that has to be sort of kept up. That type of energy is really going to be tested. And we can see for many, many millions of people, this has already been tested, and those tests will continue to come. So if you are a person who has been paying off debt, who has been getting your overhead lower, then you are really, really on track here, because as the tests come, you'll be in a much better position to wear through the storm, without any problem, or with minimal problems. And for those people who have had drastic experiences with having a lot and then having nothing, just know that everything that this is a major spiritual principle that's wanting to come through here, is that everything we need actually doesn't come from our job, it doesn't come from our spouse, it doesn't come from our parents, it doesn't come from the government, it actually comes from Spirit. So there's been a lot of middle people, and that's part of what's being tested, okay? So the more you can return back to Spirit, know that you'll have what you need. It might not be everything that you had or everything that you think you want, but you will have what you need, and those definitions of needs are definitely going to be the subject of a lot of this transformation, as will the topic of freedom. For some people, freedom means buying an expensive house and being able to do that, and take expensive trips and being able to do that. For other people, freedom means not being married to a mortgage and not having, high overhead. So the many ways that freedom can look for different people are going to be reviewed, and there's going to be a lot of this focus on the energy of freedom, the subjective experience of what freedom is. And that may change for you. You might have thought freedom was having things more simple, and then now all of a sudden a lot of money comes to you, and now you have a different type of freedom that you're exploring. And no one is better than the other per se. These are dances, they're games that we're playing within. But this topic of freedom, this topic of overhead, this topic of stress related to trying to keep things up, there are a lot of people that have been trying to keep things up, whatever that looks like for you, that it's going to be changing. And your storyline with this is going to be in an evolution, and those the clashes that come are going to help you to redefine this for yourself. It is also very, very important, must know, that even though many, many, many millions of people have been negatively affected by COVID financially and health-wise, and by the breakdown of the markets and the changes that have gone on, there are also very, very many people who have actually done really well and thrived through this. And when you look at the numbers, if we look at a certain number of people that are unemployed, or a certain percentage of people that are unemployed, that percentage, although obviously I'm not diminishing the catastrophic nature of what has gone on here for individuals in society. But what I'm pointing out is that it's a lower percentage of people that have actually become unemployed compared to the total population of people. And so there's like a 90% of people, if we're looking at a 10% unemployment rate, that's not going to be the same everywhere, but just using it as an example, there are still 90% of people that could actually be thriving and could be benefiting from the changes that are going on and using ingenuity to step into these new markets. So I mention this only to inspire hope that if you are in the percentage of people that are having a really hard time, know that that's not the only opportunities that are available to you, and through the difficulties could spring new industry, new ways of working with money and exchange, and new ways of making your ends meet and possibly even thriving, going beyond that. So it is a very exciting time. So some other must-knows have to do with a look at what happened before when Uranus was in Taurus, for example, okay? So World War II happened, right? So this energy of war. When Saturn and Uranus squared each other in the past, we had civil war here in the United States. And I'm sure there are other stories like it in other places in the world. So the energy of war is definitely part of this. But again, we've already been doing this. So the way that war looks now is not necessarily the way that war was before. So we might not have people in their certain colored coats facing off on a hill with other people in other colored coats and fighting, okay? That might not be the predominance of the war experience, but the war experience has been happening. And the division of nations has been, and people, has been happening, and we're in the midst of that, and that will continue. Now, in certain places, like even in the United States, again, as an example, in certain townships, there are actually people protesting and fighting and killing each other. And this is like a modern day version of civil war. So, I think it's very unlikely that we're going to have just a bunch of people with rifles and machine guns facing off as the way war, as we think of war. But there are going to be people, an armed country, armed citizens, exerting their right to have those arms versus the other side of that. So there is this a new type of a war that has been going on. People will continue to be driving around in driving parades, exerting their rights to say, I don't like what's going on, this is what I believe, and there's going to be a very great continued polarization of these two sides. So I just wanted to speak to that because I don't know what's going to happen as far as wars in the world, wars in different countries. Certainly the energy of war is present, but I just wanted to assure you that just because that energy is present and just because in the past that was going on, again, we don't have to have it look the way that it did. And there are other wars that are going on. There are differences in opinion about vaccines, and one person thinks freedom is making sure everyone has the vaccine. One other person thinks freedom is not having to have the vaccine, and they're facing off against each other in that war. Okay, so you see there are these mini wars that are going on, and the energy is already manifesting here in 2020, and it's going to continue and get stronger and probably a little more dramatic, if not a lot more dramatic in certain situations in 2021. And again, we're dancing through this through most of 2022 as well. So people are going to get more defined in what they believe, what they stand for, and there are other ways of looking at this too. We live on a planet of a polarity. This is a planet where good and bad exists, and light and dark, and everything has its polarized state. And we seem to swing back and forth in these, pendulum swings. And even throughout history, we swing into one thing and then we swing back into another thing. And I personally believe that when we're working with spiritual principles and connecting directly with spirit, that there are messages available about unifying these opposites, and that we can be doing inner and outer work to see the bigger picture. Okay, this person has this side of the story, this person has this side of the story, and there are unifying principles that can bring those sides together. And there's so much energy of ingenuity with this aspect that could bring new solutions for how sides that are very diverse can come together. And certainly the story of people, from the gender perspective, from the race perspective, from any perspective you can apply this, there is this simultaneous polarity, but also people seeking the unification of these opposites. And so we can make really great headway with seeking these mitigating solutions, and breakthroughs may be made there. Certainly breakthroughs in medical technology, in all technology, And things that we can't even imagine are going to come to pass in a very short amount of time. Things that have just been the wild imaginings of, prophetic authors from years ago. Those things are going to be coming to pass, some for better and worse. Like, we have to fine-tune the powers of the new discoveries. But it is a very exciting time, knowing that a lot of solutions to problems that were really long-standing are going to start breaking through. So amidst this division, the challenge, the squares are difficult angles, so we're going to feel the pressure of that. There are also some other must-knows to keep this in perspective. Because when unknowns come up and when clashes come up, fear comes up. And when fear comes up, people don't act in their highest expression. Their autonomic nervous system gets hijacked by fight or flight. And all of a sudden, their prefrontal cortex access is gone. And that means that they're in fight, flight, or freeze, and they can't access higher knowing, which is what we get from the prefrontal cortex. Higher knowing, connection to intuition, seeing the bigger picture. Okay, so some things to keep in mind. Things are going to get weird. There are going to be a lot of surprises, for better and worse. It's going to be stressful. These aspects are going to be stressful. But we've always had plagues. Ever since, there are mummies that have been unearthed, and there have been signs of plague on them. Smallpox, I believe, is one thing where like pock marks were found in mummified bodies. And, we know that plagues have existed since the biblical accounts of everything that has gone on. So plague, in the form now of COVID, is not new to us. And again, I'm not minimizing just the catastrophic nature of what has gone on, especially for certain people and certain families who have been more personally affected by this. But keeping it in perspective, plagues are not new to humanity, and humanity has prevailed over the plagues. And most of humanity is going to make it through COVID, okay, with flying colors. They're going to live, and they're going to live on. We've always had war, okay? So we talked about this before. The warlike energies of the combinations of these planets. We've always had war. Since the beginning of time, there's war. And we have war within ourselves. That battle of good and evil is always being fought within each individual. And since we live in a holographic reality, everything inside is outside and everything outside is inside. So the battle of good and evil is fought in each individual and is cast out into the external playing field for us to maneuver. So we've always had war, and most people have gotten through whatever version of war is at that time. We've always had people fighting for freedom. We've always had people rebelling, thinking that things were not fair for them. We've always had governments that have been called into question because people don't like how things are being operated. And people have been fighting for freedom always, and we're going to keep fighting for freedom. And that subjective experience of freedom is going to change. People are going to continue fighting. So we're here. We're fighting for freedom. That's going to be ongoing. We've done it before. Probably going to be doing that for a long time. So just to kind of keep that into perspective. Okay, so something else to know is that however long-lived this series of storylines is, 2020, 2021, 2022, it's a 3-year period that this is going on, that time is going to pass, and those aspects are not going to be affecting us in the way that they were. They're going to make some permanent changes to our experience, but this too shall pass. And this is another thing that is a must know. As we're going through these uncertain times, and as there are there's a lot of information that could make one very afraid, and I'm not promoting nor discounting the validity of the types of things that we may have to fear. But it's not my work to focus on that. It's my work to focus on what is great about it, what can we understand about the challenges so that we can work with them more consciously, and to put it in a bigger perspective to help us not get completely washed away by a monofocus on just this thing that's going on. Because despite the fact that this aspect is happening, there are other things going on too. And I talk about these in my other resources, so I'm not going to get into that now, but there are many different things that are going on at once, and all of them are part of the bigger picture, but they're not the only thing that's happening. So this is something that's going on, but it's not everything that's going on. Okay. One more must know. This has to do with the idea of industry, the idea of entrepreneurship, the idea of creating. One of the most exciting things about this square is that the square between Saturn and Uranus is that it's an aspect for creators to rejoice about, because the insights of the planet Uranus, of the energy of Aquarius, are just, they're mind-blowing, and they could be sudden. So you in an instant could have an idea. You can implement that idea and it could completely change your life for the better. And it can help other people. That's part of what this energy of the age of Aquarius is about, that we're moving into, whether you're talking about the big age of Aquarius or whether you're talking about, we've got a huge focus on Aquarius at this time in the stars for sure, and that's not disputable. So regardless of how you want to frame that, the energy of Uranus is very strong. And Uranus brings these sudden insights, these sudden solutions. So if you are someone who wanted to create something, or even if you weren't, even if you're a person, every once in a while I'll meet someone who says, you know what, I am the most uncreative person. I'm not interested in any of that. And then those people, just as much as anybody else, can have an amazing idea that not only revolutionizes their experience, but also can revolutionize the world. It's the cosmos is very ripe with lightning strikes of sudden breakthroughs for our personal experience, our personal freedom, and our perspective of that, clearing personal karma and global karma, ancestral karma, and creating something really amazing and really exciting, and being part of the creation of new industry and what business and work and employment and our daily life experience is going to look like now and in the future. So if you want to have more information, as I mentioned before, I definitely suggest that you listen to my video, How Astrology Explains the Coronavirus and the Systems Breaking Down. And even though that was focused on aspects that took place over 2020, don't be lulled into thinking that that information is not relevant as time marches on from that point, because the more you understand what happened in this very critical, pivotal year for humanity, the more you can move forward with that understanding. And it will fill in more of the pieces of how we can use astrology to live in our highest expression. So if you would like to have even more information about what this month could look like for you and how you can best use the energies, then definitely tap into all of the free resources I have for you. You can go to anniehelpsyou.com. Definitely sign up for my free email newsletter. Now more than ever, there are perks that come along with that, because besides getting my monthly write-up that shows the sweet and salty dates and what you can expect, what the aspects are, what you can expect from them, and what the month looks like, all in a written version delivered into your inbox 1 month early, plus my 28-day virtual coaching program called Shine for free, I'm working on having software that will allow you to run birth charts for free. Now, I can't make any guarantees that this will be in place by the time you get or listening to this, because it is something I'm working on, but it is things like this that are perks that come along with being on my free email newsletter list. So you'll definitely want to do that at anniehelpsyou.com. If you want simple written horoscopes by me that will give you good details but aren't as technical as some of my other resources, then you can go to my beautiful website, cozybysweetstarlight.com. All of the links that I'm giving you are also in the notes underneath the video. Or if you're listening to the podcast version of this, they're in the notes underneath the podcast. Also, if you would like to have to listen rather than view if you're driving, or if you're not wanting to deal with the mid-roll ads that YouTube is pushing against even the creator's will, then you can check out my new podcast, Astro Kisses with Annie Botticelli. The link for that is in the notes underneath the video as well. You can see my free courses at lumelife.com, L-U-M-E life.com. That's my school, Luminous Life Multiversity. So besides having free courses, I also have some paid courses. And if you think I go into lots of details with all of the free things I give you, you should see what the paid offerings look like, especially my course called Becoming a Professional Astrologer Mastery Course, which will equip you to do whatever you'd like to do with astrology, whether it's just help your friends and family and not do it professionally, help your own self-development, or become a practicing astrologer. And I also give information on how to make your astrology practice work financially, because I have been a business coach for a long time too, so that gets worked into the course. Okay, so definitely get my book Planetology if you're a fan of my work and you'd like to go deeper and you'd like to align with the natural rhythms of the universe. That's what this book is about. You can find Planetology anywhere and everywhere. I hope you have a wonderful month, and I'll see you next month. Bye.